I have a sneaking suspicion that Mars Red is going to be a very criminally underappreciated show. Now, granted, as of the recording of this, the discussion around this, it just recently released, so there's not too much to really go off of, but based on like the small glimpses of comments I've seen around this episode, it gives me a bad impression that people are not going to stick with this one, and I hope they do, because I truly feel like this is vampires done right. It seems different, it feels artsy at times, and it feels like, for the first time I can remember in so long, vampires aren't a gimmick in a vampire story. They're important, but the thing that defines an episode or defines a story in something like Mars Red is the characters first and foremost. Episode 1 was a great kind of like almost standalone story. Episode 2 kicks us off with the actual main cast that we'll be following. Some have that type of absurd, almost mad scientist-like personas. Some have that kind of quiet, silent killer. And others are kind of confused about what they are because they are a part of like a vampire squadron. If you're able to change and not end up dead by getting bit, you either can work with them in order to stop people that are hurting those on the street, or you'll get killed. And to me, this is an incredibly engaging show with still best ending of the season, I have to say. Love High to love his music. But I absolutely love what this episode was able to do. In terms of Flash, maybe it didn't have as many like crazy directorial choices. It felt like it was a different type of directing than we would typically see in the anime community. And I'm getting a similar flashback. I forget the name of the show. It's something like Rakugo Shinju or something like that. Someone will let me know in the comment section, but it was a few years back there at this point, maybe even more. There was a show that was all about like a type of play, a theater or something like that. And a lot of people I remember talked a lot of shit about that show, saying it was boring and that nothing happened. And I remember over time it became almost like a cult classic, it feels like. Well, I don't think the same thing will happen with Mars Red. I'm getting a similar feeling based on some of the reaction that some people calling it boring, and I'm like, no, there's a lot of interesting subject matter here. You gotta stick with this one, but obviously it's all subjective, right? I mean, like, what someone thinks is good and what someone thinks is bad is always going to be subjective, and there's no objective truth of what a good anime is. It's all opinions, but I feel like some people are expecting too much flashy vampire killing and not enough like, okay, yeah, there's a lot of new elements thrown at us in this episode, but it's there for a reason to get us fully introduced to the world. And seeing the idea of how reckless the leader, Maida, is in this group, I mean, he seemingly sacrificed his arm just to kill one vampire, right? What is his purpose? Is he trying to find an early grave, or is his opinion, you know, if you're going to lead an army of soldiers here and you're defeating vampires, it doesn't matter if you lose an arm or a leg, the objective is to kill these characters. I'm curious if it's going to be the direction that, because given the fact that they have like a mad scientist who's made blood candies and vials of blood in order to help them keep going, I'm curious if he'll have the ability to make like robotic arms, or maybe there's some sort of medication that will let him grow an arm like a vampire would without actually turning him into one. I'm curious if they're going to go that direction, because it feels like that's probably the direction they would go, but if not, it seems like we have a leader who is perfectly fine killing himself even for a mindless vampire, which on one hand probably makes him one of the best leaders you could have for this division, because he's perfectly fine giving his life to save others. To him, given the fact that a single vampire in this episode is saying that 10 to 20 humans should be easy for us to kill, it's understandable why for him he wouldn't look at it as probably the long-term goal of saying, hey, you know, even though I'm leading, one vampire is worth giving my arm for because one vampire could kill an entire town. He's not looking at it as, I'm an anime character who has to stay alive for the big bad of the series. No, he's saying every vampire is essentially a life or death situation, and I'll do whatever it takes to kill a vampire, even if it means killing myself. It's reckless, but you also kind of have to respect the leadership style. Just watching this episode, I mean, it kicks off with like a battle in a snowy location, which you don't get to see these types of tactics too much. I think the last time I can recall is in Golden Kamuy, where when you're breathing in the snow and you're in the middle of a battlefield, soldiers would actually put snow in their mouth to cover up their breath so they wouldn't be seen. The little details like that I always really appreciate. And then of course by the end of the episode you get this really interesting, once again Shaft-like directorial choice for the vampire hunting. The first one ended up dead pretty quick, but that female was like spinning around in such a beautiful way. And to just see the difference of the intro and the ending feeling like that's probably how we're going to go for any episode that kills or hunts vampires. Something adrenaline pumping to start it, something adrenaline pumping to end it. But the rest of it is going to be, you know, soldiers planning on how to take out vampires. I personally really loved the cast that we got introduced to. Ever since I saw the promotional material, I was interested in who clearly was going to be the mad scientist of the group. and he didn't disappoint. He didn't go as overboard as I was expecting, but personally, given the type of story this is, I'm perfectly fine with him having a crazy anime scientist look, with clearly a kind of humorous attitude that could be seen as a little twisted. I mean, he literally shoots one of the soldiers in the ass and says, hey, as long as you drink some blood, you'll be fine. No harm, no foul, basically. It's the type of nonchalant humor I dig, and it's nice to have the varying personalities in a group that don't feel like your typical high school, ridiculous vampire hunters. Even shows I've enjoyed in a similar setting, I feel like they have the same type of personalities we see time and time again. But having one who apparently is the most powerful of the group not really want to hurt, but want to try to help because he probably sees himself in these vampires saying, hey, I'm really no different than you, please join our side so I don't have to kill you. He has all this power, but he doesn't want to use it. You have a silent killer who is just honestly badass. I simply love it. He's just saying, who do you want me to kill? I'll go kill. That's simply all you need. He has a cool mask. He has a cool ability. He's teleporting around. That just seems interesting to me. And I think could also cause issues down the line if there really is someone who wants to switch sides and he pops up and just stabs him in the heart. You have one guy who clearly doesn't want to be under Maida's control, but at the same time, given the smoke situation at the very end where he lights a cigarette for his boss, it's nice to see that even though he is a very, he's a blockhead is probably the best way, I do get the impression that he could be one of the most loyal characters down the line once he gets his head out of his own ass, which he's already taken steps to do so. And just the numerous characters, it just felt like it's a cast of characters that feel like adults, even if they have some anime twist to them, like a mad scientist or the silent killer, so to speak, right? I like how this is a cast of characters that isn't meant to just say, hey, the reason you're going to watch Mars Red is because they have this goofy personality is going to have these tropey gimmicks. No, they're a group of adults that are tasked with basically killing and finding vampires, as most of them pretty much are, even though they don't want to be. If Maida himself is going to be a vampire, because given the fact that he did lose an arm, I'm curious if he's just going to say, you know what, I'm going to risk it, let me turn into a vampire, it will make me actually have better shot at fixing people, all things considered, or if he's going to try to hold on to his humanity. But for me, despite seeing comments saying that it felt like a lot less interesting of a directing choice for the episode, I felt like there was always something different with every scene. Sure, there's some standard anime shots where it's just close-ups or wide shots of the characters, but they almost always pull back on interesting scenery, like the fact that when they're going to investigate where vampires are getting their blood, they go to this one shop, and the shop is filled with so many details, and the idea of a shopkeeper not willing to sell out his customers, but he's willing to sell out his rivals because he doesn't want to have competition in the vampire blood business. There's so many little bells and whistles that makes it seem really interesting to me, which is always disappointing when you have a show that you're really enjoying. It happened with Golden Kamuy for me, it's happening with Mars Red, it feels like, and not a lot of people are hyping it up. It's all preference, of course, but I really think this is going to be one of those shows that if people are enjoying, they gotta spread the word, whether it's social media or just friends by word of mouth. It's something that feels different, and it feels like vampires are obviously important, the vampire element is there, but the vampire element's there the same way any military story has guns and tanks and ammunition. Obviously they're important, but the thing that ties everything together is the characters themselves. And by having certain vampires clearly needing to be put down and others probably just wanting to have a free life and they didn't choose this for themselves, I think we're going to have a lot of really interesting personal stories. And after last week's episode, I saw a lot of people point out that it seemed like he killed his fiancée that he never met, and I thought it could go that direction, or maybe it was just supposed to represent how both of them never found their love. After this week's episode, it definitely seems crystal clear that that was his fiancée for sure, which is a pretty tragic fate. I mean, he's leaving flowers for her and things like that. That reporter is still kind of bugging him, which I have a feeling the reporter is going to play a pretty prominent role down the line. It'll be interesting to see if she causes more harm than good, because if she's investigating things that he doesn't want her to investigate, that could be pretty explosive. Just overall, I had a lot of fun with Mars Red, and it's going to be a show I'll definitely review for all 13 episodes, and I hope a lot of people will stick around for this one, because I think it's really interesting, and I hope I'm not the only one feeling that. Let me know your thoughts and feelings down below. Did you love it? Do you hate it? Your favorite moment? Whatever you're feeling, let me know. Enjoy the video, leave a like, share your support, and remember to hit that subscribe button if you happen to be new around here. Since next time, everyone, please take care and have a good one.